Well, good evening, everyone. As you know, my name is Teri Shore, and I welcome you to the launch. Welcome to the Sonoma Valley Naturalist launch and my pilot program on the Pileated Woodpecker. And Sonoma Valley Naturalist is my capstone project for the California Naturalist Certification Course 2020. Which is given each year in Sonoma Valley by the Sonoma Ecology Center. My plan is to develop Sonoma Valley Naturalist as a forum for delving into nature by sharing expertise and experiences that inspire and connect us. So I'm hoping to hold maybe one a month, focusing on the lands and people of our Sonoma Valley watershed. I'm going to let a couple of people more in right now. And the Pileated Woodpecker is the first program. Why? Because I love these woodpeckers, no other reason. And I did want to once again give credit to the beautiful artwork that I was given permission to use by Julia Puzgai, who is a local artist. Her work is found on Pansy Creations, and I just love her work. She has all kinds of different animals, and I have this one hanging in my living room. So just to give you a little bit of background, the UC California Naturalist Program seeks to foster a committed core of volunteer naturalists and citizen scientists trained and ready to take an active role in natural resource conservation, education, and restoration. The California Naturalist course is open to adults and has no prerequisites other than an interest in learning about the natural world. And it is put on by various groups around Sonoma County, around the state of California. And let me let these folks in. And Sonoma Ecology Center has sponsored this one, focused on Sonoma Valley, which I've really learned a lot about. And Sonoma Ecology Center works to address challenges related to water supply and quality, open space, rural character, biodiversity, energy, climate change, and a better quality of life for all residents. And this is their 30th anniversary, so happy anniversary to the Sonoma Ecology Center. So here is our program, which we're hoping to do in an hour. So I will be talking a bit about Meet the Woodpecker, and then we have two very esteemed guests with us today. Carolyn Green is a certified naturalist, California naturalist, board member of Madrone Audubon Society, and active in the Redwood Ornithological Society. Carolyn, maybe you can say that and say hello. Oh, can I? Okay, I'm meeting you. Okay.
Yeah, Redwood Regional Ornithological Society.
Thank you.
A bunch of bird nerds. We'll call it.
Well, thank you. And I met Carolyn on a very wonderful walk earlier this year, and I'm really pleased that she had the time to participate. Actually, I met her on a walk with the Sonoma Mountain Preservation with Meg Beeler, and Meg Beeler is the chair of Sonoma Mountain Preservation and founder of Earth Caretakers. Where are you, Meg? Do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Teri, for organizing this. I think it'll be fun.
So then we will, Meg will talk, share some stories. We might be able to ask someone else who's here right now to share a story about the woodpecker. And then I'm going to end on just a couple of slides about climate and wildfire, just touching on those two issues because they're very lengthy issues, but I just couldn't move forward without at least mentioning those important issues. So, the Pileated Woodpecker, it's big and black and white with a flaming red crest. When you see this woodpecker, you'll know it. Chances are you'll hear it long before you spot this magnificent bird, whether it's screeching above a forest canopy or drumming high up on a redwood tree. It's the pileated woodpecker. You can usually get a good look at it once you find it, since it is the biggest woodpecker in North America. It's similar in size to a crow, or I would even say almost as big as a raven, some of the ones I've seen. In North America, it would be second in size only to the ivory-billed woodpecker of the southeast, which is believed to be extinct. So the fascinating pileated woodpecker has kind of the weirdest of names. I mean, the other ones are acorn or Harry or you know, Lewis, have normal names. This one is a weird name. And it comes from the word pileus, meaning a cap. And it is pronounced two different ways, pileated and pileated. Now, around here, it seems like we pretty much say pileated. That's what I like. But, you know, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. This wily bird and its red cap will get your attention. So let's listen to what they hear, what they sound like. I'll play a couple of recordings of their calls and drumming. And one thing I would like to mention is they don't sing in the traditional way of like a songbird. That's just not their thing. But they do use their calls for both territory and attracting mates, and for alarm calls and the usual ways that birds communicate. And also I was interested to learn that the drumming is, yes, it's used for drumming into the tree, but it's almost used even more for communicating across distances with other woodpeckers. Because for the most part, they are solitary birds. So these recordings are courtesy of National Audubon. Here's another one. I'm going to go to the next slide because that has a long kind of a long space before the next drumming comes along. So when you hear those birds, you'll know it. When you'll be like, what was that? So let's just talk a little bit about where they live. Across the U.S., these birds, these pileated woodpeckers are not common, but they're not rare either. This king of the woodpeckers lives in forests across the U.S., from our neck of the woods in Northern California, up across the northern states and into Canada, and deep into the southeast. You'll pretty much find them wherever there are forests. But you won't see them in grasslands, you won't see them in deserts, and so this is where we see them. According to Audubon, they're more common all year round in the southeast. They're less common in the lighter areas toward the west. Yeah, so they're definitely here in Sonoma Valley in our very own watershed. And here's a picture of the Sonoma Valley watershed and our Sonoma Creek watershed, where we have all kinds of creeks coming in from every direction. So that's a whole nother lecture itself, talking about the watershed, but I wanted to give you a bit of a visual. And we're very fortunate to the Ecology Center and all the other people in our community have worked to protect this land, because we have quite a bit of open space and habitat and trees and forests where you can find the pileated woodpecker. When I've been out walking, I've definitely been stopped in my tracks every time I've seen the birds. I'll show on my cursor, this is the Mayacamas range. So I've definitely seen them up in this area, approximately, you know, Sugarloaf Ridge State Park, Hood Mountain Regional Park, and then here's the valley, here's the town of Sonoma, here's Sonoma Mountain, and I've definitely seen them in Jack London State Park, and also on the other side over at Fairfield Osborne Preserve. Now, we don't really know how many there are in Sonoma Valley or in Sonoma County. They are at this point considered a species of least concern by Audubon. The local breeding bird atlas indicates that we probably have maybe around 500 breeding pairs across all of Sonoma County. The Audubon Christmas bird count, which has been held every year for many years across the country, their data indicated that for the whole state of California that the populations of these birds are increasing. So that's all good news. Let's take another look at the pileated. Let's look at a short video so you can kind of see a little more up close and personal what these birds look like. This was taken somewhere in Northern California. Oh, there we go. Oh my God. Okay. Let's hide that one. So Matt mentioned Woody the woodpecker. So the pileated woodpecker, we believe, is actually the model for Woody the woodpecker. Many of us who are baby boomers probably quite remember the Woody woodpecker cartoon. So there was quite a cute little perspective that was put up by Michael Ellis, who's a well-known local naturalist. So this lightens it up a little bit, and then we'll get back into more of the biology. But I thought this was kind of fun.
In 1979, Walter Lantz was given a Special Academy Award for bringing joy and laughter to every part of the world, especially via his Woody Woodpecker cartoons. Lantz shared with the audience that on his honeymoon with Gracie Stafford in 1941, a woodpecker kept pounding on the roof of their cabin. The bird was relentlessly drilling little holes and stuffing acorns in them. Gracie suggested using that oral inspiration as a cartoon character, and although Lantz was skeptical, he went ahead with her suggestion. The rest, as they say, is history. However, the bird that actually inspired Lantz's drawing of Woody was most certainly not an acorn woodpecker, which was clearly the species keeping the newly married couple amused. Woody is most likely a pileated woodpecker, or at least a cartoonist version of one. There is only one woodpecker that bears a prominent crest, or pileus, where the word pileated comes from. That is, assuming that the ivory-billed woodpecker is indeed extinct. Not seen since the 1940s, ornithologists got real excited several years ago with reports of one in Arkansas. Unfortunately, this sighting proved unfounded. A pileus, by the way, was a felt conical hat worn by the ancient Greeks. And both Woody and the pileated have prominent red crest, whereas the acorn woodpecker does not. Pileateds are the biggest woodpeckers in North America and make hefty rectangular-shaped cavities in large trees. Both the male and the female drum very loudly on hollow trees during the breeding season. They prefer old-growth forest or secondary growth as long as there are some large standing trees. Annandale State Park in Sonoma County, Five Brooks Pond in West Marin, and the Santa Cruz Mountains are all excellent places to see these magnificent birds, which range across all of North America. This is Michael Ellis with a perspective.
The opinions expressed in the Perspective series are those of the commentators and not necessarily those of its funder or KQED Public Radio.
So let's, that I thought was valuable and interesting. So let's just, I have one last kind of overview life cycle before I turn it over to Carolyn and another short little sound bite. One thing that's fascinating about the pileated is that it is a keystone species. And a keystone species is special because it alters the ecosystem in ways that benefit other animals. And they do this by creating cavities in trees that are used by other birds and small animals. So without the pileated, the habitat would be forever changed and we could potentially have other species displaced. They're kind of in the same group as the beavers that build dams to flood creeks and rivers to provide wetlands for other species, and they're both considered ecosystem engineers. So the flashy pileateds do nest and breed in large tree cavities that they excavate with powerful chisel bills in large oaks and redwoods and other tree types throughout the Bay Area. They are resident here year-round and they mate for life. After raising their brood each year, they abandon their nests to make room for bluebirds, squirrels, and others who move in later. Their favorite food is the carpenter ant, and they dig out dead or decaying wood in both live and dead trees, I'm learning, and lap up those ants with very, very long, sticky tongues. They don't eat acorns. They do feed on other insects, nuts, and fruit. And I just wanted to quote before we go to the little short piece about what they like to eat is I was just looking at a research paper out of Oregon, which studied the relationship of the pileated woodpecker to forest management. And I'll just quote one little sentence that says, "The pileated is the only woodpecker that can excavate in sound wood," sound as in healthy wood, "by exposing healthy trees to infection by heart rot fungi. They may contribute to the creation of future nesting, roosting, and foraging habitat for both themselves and other species." So that is really what makes them a keystone species. So let's hear a little bit more about what they like to eat.
This is BirdNote. An expert woodcarver is hard at work, preparing a picnic. This pileated woodpecker is hammering its massive chisel of a bill against the trunk of a cedar tree, making large rectangular incisions, some nearly a foot long. Inside, if she's lucky, are thousands of delicious black carpenter ants. And this woodpecker is perfectly equipped to harvest the treasure she's uncovered. She has a sticky tongue that's more than 5 inches long that she stretches into the trunk, lapping up hundreds of ants and swallowing them whole. Ants make up more than half of her diet. Woodpeckers, as a group, eat far more ants than most other birds do. Many other vertebrates tend to avoid ants because of their stings or because of the noxious chemicals they contain, like formic acid. Another member of the woodpecker family, the northern flicker, is known to have ingested over 5,000 ants in one sitting.
Oh my God.
So while the pileated woodpecker and northern flicker will eat lots of different kinds of insects and berries, there's nothing quite like a feast of ants. For BirdNote, I'm Mary McCann.
I like these words because they're so funny. So now to delve a bit more into the amazing pileated woodpecker, oopsie, I would like to now turn it over to Carolyn Green, who I introduced earlier, so I'll just turn it over to you.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So everyone loves woodpeckers. They're really one of the crowd pleasers of the bird world. And why are they so popular and endearing unless one is happening to be drumming on the side of your house and putting acorns there, or you're on your honeymoon somewhere? I guess we know what habitat Walter Lantz took his honeymoon in. Anyway, several reasons they're so popular. They're easy to identify. They're noisy. They're colorful in their own way. And they're here year round. They don't abandon us in the wintertime. Plus, their names match what they actually do. I mean, what does a towhee or a robin or a finch or a grebe's name tell you about the bird? And one unique thing about birds, and it's one of the things that I specialize in as compared to other wildlife, even when we don't actually see them, we frequently know that they're among us through the sounds they make and the kind of work that they do and their tracings. And as Teri mentioned, pileatids make these distinctive rectangular shaped borings, both for their nest cavities and when they're looking for food. And they're often fairly low on a tree trunk too. I've seen nesting holes as low as 20 feet. And I think we have a photo later of some boring holes that are within 5 feet of the ground. So pileatids are often found pretty close to the ground. They do have these, they nest in cavities, so their eggs are white. They don't need to conceal them. They tend to have pretty good reproductive success, at least the hatching of the eggs, because nesting in a cavity, you're protected from most predators and also cold and wet. Most birds have probably at least a 50% mortality in the first year. It's hard to learn to feed and fly and all of that, but at least woodpeckers give them a good start. Now let's talk about their flight. As I'm sure most of you birders know, most woodpeckers have a deeply undulating flight, up and down, and kind of slow, not a real fast flight. But pileatids are quite different. They fly almost in a straight line, and they have these deep, slow wing beats. So they're quite easy to recognize when they're flying, and they often call when they're flying, which makes it even easier. Pretty unmistakable when you see a bird that large and having white wing patches when it's flying. I call them the king and queen of woodpeckers because of these beautiful white caps that they have. And in the picture that Teri put up, you can see what we call dimorphism, which is a feature of plants and animals. Not too many plants, but lots of animals. The male and female are distinguished by observable features. In this slide, the female is on the top picture. She has a smaller crown and no red malar, M-A-L-A-R, fancy word. I have a couple more too. Malar stripe that distinguishes the male, the lower one. In California, actually, most woodpeckers in California, we have only 2 exceptions, are dimorphic. In other words, the male and female have quite different, well, not quite different, but different appearances, usually involving presence or absence of red. The only 2 woodpeckers we have that aren't dimorphic are the Lewis's woodpecker and the red-breasted sapsucker. Okay, to talk about sound, they've already announced themselves, but we like woodpeckers because they're quite vocal. They call frequently and loudly, and each has a specific drumming sound as well as a call. Pileatids are distinctive, as you've heard, but they can sometimes be confused with another woodpecker, another large woodpecker, actually not as big as a pileated, but the beautiful northern flicker. Now, the flicker has 2 sounds. It has a pew sound, and then it has a sound very similar to the pileated, but not quite as loud or insistent. So it's really good to practice distinguishing between the flicker and the pileated, especially because they occupy similar habitats. Pileatids are more restricted to forests, Flickers have a wider choice of habitats. And both of those are, also on sound, because if you birded with me, you know that I'm really promoting birding by ear. It's just a practiced skill like anything else. But an acorn woodpecker sounds quite different from a Nuttall's woodpecker, and we have them both. And regarding bird sound nowadays, if I hear an unfamiliar bird song, I will record it on my voice memo on my phone. And I have a couple of friends, much better birders than I am, that I'll send the files to, and they'll usually email me back within a few minutes. Although one of them requires that I at least make a guess if I'm going to have his expertise. And I'm sure you know about bird apps that have sound recordings. We use them for identification, but very, very sparingly in the field, and not during nesting season, and not when we're doing surveys either. So they're great for learning, but we just don't use them in the field. I'd like to talk a little bit about adaptations that pileateds have, as well as other woodpeckers, and these adaptations allow them to be so good at what they do, especially climbing trees. And in a couple of the previous slides, you would have seen one of them. First of all, they have quite short legs, and they have what I call tail and toe tripods. So as you saw in her picture before, most birds have 3 toes pointing forward and to grasp, and 1 pointing backward to grasp a horizontal perch. But woodpeckers have zygodactyl feet, 2 toes forward and 2 pointing backward. Roadrunners also have zygodactyl feet. And this is very important and interesting, and it also showed in one of Teri's previous slides. The 2 central tail feathers in birds are called rectrices, have quite stiff shafts and tips. And if you find woodpecker feathers on the ground and it's a tail feather, you'll be able to feel that stiff tip. And so the tail tip feathers form the 3rd part of the tripod, 2 feet and 1 tail. And woodpeckers, all of them, especially pileateds, press these tail feathers against whatever surface they're climbing or clinging to stabilize themselves while they're drumming or excavating and removing food. And when you realize that they excavate holes in one of nature's most resilient surfaces, tree wood, that does require a long and chisel-shaped bill. And because the woodpecker's bill is generally straight and they drill at a 90-degree angle to the tree surface, it prevents the bird's head from tilting to the side and thus putting more pressure on the skull and the head and neck muscles. Their nostrils are covered with little bristles that keep sawdust and shavings out of their nasal cavity. And their eyes are, as we can see on this slide, are placed quite a bit to each side. So also they're able to avoid getting hit with the sawdust that they're drilling on, and they close their eyes when they're drumming as well. And their most amazing adaptation, and you've probably read that that people who are building bicycle helmets and football helmets are studying how woodpecker skulls help cushion their drilling. And it's really hammering too. Teri mentioned briefly their tongue and their tongue bones. Their tongue bones are, you may have seen pictures of them, called the hyoid process, Hyoid, and the bones actually go through the mouth and around the back of the head, and they curl up there. And then when the bird needs them to grab those carpenter ants, it's able to unwind it. And they do have sticky tongues and occasionally barbs on the tongues as well. Resources for you. I don't know if you can see it, but a lot of my interesting tidbits are from this wonderful book, The Remarkable Woodpeckers, by Stan Tekiela, who's a naturalist that's written quite a lot of good books. Can we see that, Teri? Are you able to see the book? Not really. You're muted, so I can't hear you. But
Sorry.
Anyway.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, just right there in front of your camera. And I can also send it out to people in a follow-up email or in chat if you want to
Okay.
stick it in
Just
there.
spell the author's last name.
Yeah, good question. Stan Tekiela, Tekiela. And it covers all American woodpeckers. And, we have most of them in California. There are very few that we don't find in California. Like to finish with a little bit of comment on apps. Oh, yes, there's that beautiful.
Do you want to look at the video?
Sure.
You want to show the video real quick before
Yeah.
you wrap up to talk
Sure.
about the undulation? I think it's kind of a cool video. It's not from around here, but I couldn't find one that was as good as this one to really show you how this bird flies. It's somewhere in the southeast, I believe. Hopefully the full screen will pop up here in a moment.
You can see those deep wing beats.
Now he stops there.
Yeah, so the wings become almost vertical.
Looks like it's doing the breaststroke. Stroke, stroke.
Couldn't really mistake that for anything else.
No, definitely not.
Which is good. So just a couple of words about apps. Most birders don't take field guides into the field anymore. We just use our phone with apps and hopefully good batteries. And I'm asked frequently what bird apps I use. I have several. Sibley, Audubon, iBird Pro, Nat Geo, Peterson, and Merlin. And you've probably tried Merlin. That's one where you can plug in where you are and how big the bird is and the major colors. And they come up with an ID. And I worked on woodpeckers today, and Merlin did come up with woodpeckers. So that's a good one to have. But my one caveat is once you review and choose an app or a field guide, learn it and stick with it. Don't work with several at a time. That just gets too confusing. And I do volunteer for a lot of bird walks. I lead a lot of bird walks. I do bird surveys for Audubon Canyon Ranch and the state parks and Pepperwood also. And I'd like to just leave you with one last and really important thought about field biology in general. And when you're trying to learn or identify a plant or an animal or anything, my main mantra is to not rely on just one field characteristic. It's easy to key in on color or bill, but to really identify and learn a plant or animal, you want to take a quick look at the kind of the gestalt of the animal, and then with birds, size, habitat, where it is in the canopy, because all these characteristics will help you identify whatever you're trying to learn, because we have to identify something if we're going to learn about it, and you'll be a better naturalist overall. And don't forget to look up and listen, and I'd be very interested to hear any additional information that I may have missed or answer questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolyn. We'll definitely open up to questions at the end. And thank you very, very much for your presentation. I realize now I should have had a few more slides for you, but anyway, next time, like the picture of the tongue and the head would have been really, really helpful. So, and maybe you and I can lead a woodpecker walk before too long out in the woods. So next up, I would like to reintroduce Meg Beeler. Meg Beeler is a chair of Sonoma Mountain Preservation, and she's also a longtime resident of Sonoma Mountain. She lives on the side of the mountain, and these are her photos. And I'd love to turn it over to her to tell her story about pileated and Sonoma Mountain. Okay, I guess okay, there you go.
Thank you, Teri. Well, Carolyn will be happy to know that I first learned the pileated woodpecker by sound. I was walking just after I'd moved to Sonoma Valley. I was walking with some friends who were visiting from Iowa, and they said, "Oh, there's a pileated woodpecker." So it's such a distinctive sound that from then on, I was very excited and would look around every time I heard that sound and try to see them. But I find them to be very elusive. Sometimes they sound on a tree and then fly silently and land someplace else and don't talk. Sometimes they sound while singing, but while flying. But the picture on the right was taken by a woodpecker a few years ago who likes to hang out on that telephone pole, and that's where I got to hear the hammering. If you've ever heard it, you'll find it. You'll know it's very distinctive. And in that picture, you can see how the tail feathers are angled against the pole. And that's what Teri was talking about, or Carolyn, I'm not sure who, was talking about. They're very stiff, and so they actually work as a kind of balance for the bird, which I think is pretty interesting. There's other birds that do that, but it's such a big body, and the wingspan can be, I think, 17 inches, something like that. They're really big. So the bird on the left-hand side, I actually just saw this spring. I happened to be, maybe I heard them and I ran outside, and they were very low down by this this old apple tree that's full of sapsucker holes. And there were two woodpeckers, and they were going to the ground and to the trees, obviously having their meal of ants, but it's something I had never seen before. Really, the reason I'm a guest speaker today is I have a wonderful story of the woodpeckers nesting. So a few years ago, we started hearing the woodpeckers a lot, hammering, singing the other, or making the other sounds. And it turned out that they were building a nest in our neighbor's redwood tree. So our neighbors don't live here all the time. So we would sneak over to their house when they weren't there to watch. And what we got to see was the hole was about this big. It wasn't sort of square, or I mean, angular like you saw in the other picture. Hole was about this big. And we'd watch in the beginning, the bird would be tap, tap, tapping, and chips would fly out. And it would back up and then go back in. And as the days and weeks went on, the bird would go farther and farther into the nest. I've read that the nests are like 9 inches deep. So we wouldn't see the bird, but it would back out and the chips would fly. So we watched this bird for 2 months, making one nest, which they will never use again except to sleep in. And the female came, and the best we could figure out was that she was not happy with the nest. So the male went back to creating the nest for almost another month. Then we don't know if they laid eggs and they didn't hatch correctly or what, but anyway, they were unsuccessful in the nest. And as I said, they never came back. Well, it was such a gift, and it was so exciting to have these amazing huge birds right across the street. And to be able to really observe what they were doing when they made their nest. And I guess I wanted to mention that I am a naturalist in the old-fashioned way. I learn about things by observing them. So I watch the birds or the lizards or whatever it is, and that's a good example. When you tune into something, you know it's around, and you can just sort of study it and find out more and more about it. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I hope everybody gets to see a nest building sometimes, because it's pretty wonderful.
Well, thank you very, very much, Meg, for sharing that with us. And also, please check out sonomamountain.org, because Meg and Nancy's also on the call, Nancy Kerwan, who's with Sonoma Mountain Preservation. Great email updates, walks once we get back out in the world to start walking again. So thank you. I just have a couple more slides. I wonder, Daniel, are you still here on the call? Daniel, where are you? Unmute, yeah. Okay, hey Daniel. So Daniel, I kind of met on Nextdoor, and I was just searching around, you know, Googling, hi Jenny and Neil, Googling around for pileated, and he has had this beautiful photo. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel. Could you just tell us your pileated woodpecker story? And this was during shelter in place, which I think makes it very cool. Are you there?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you. So, so actually, right before shelter in place started, I ordered a new camera with a nice zoom. And I ordered it because I do a lot of iNaturalist work, some surveys for at the Sonoma Developmental Center and at Sugarloaf Ridge State Park and so on. And I was so excited to use my new camera that I could get great pictures of things that were far away. And then it arrived the day after shelter in place started. And so I was desperate to go out and try out my fancy new camera, but was only able to walk around the neighborhood with my kids. So I was walking just a few blocks away from my house, and at the bottom of a fire-scarred oak, in the bunch of middle of some French broom, I heard the very distinctive laugh and the very distinctive knocking. And I completely stopped paying attention to where my kids were going or what they were doing. I pulled out my camera and ran to where I thought I could get a view of the woodpecker. And I knew it was a pileated by the sound. And it was completely unconcerned about us. I didn't get any closer than maybe 50 feet. But it just went on digging, it went on crawling up and down the tree, it went on calling. It was obviously used to being able to see people. One of its eyes was pointed straight at me so it could see me, but it was hammering away and sticking its long tongue inside that tree to be able to be bothered by me. And I was able to watch it for probably 3 or 4 minutes, which was good because I was still figuring out the settings on my camera, and get some good pictures of it. And it was such a joy in the middle of sheltering in place to be able to get pictures and get a really good look at this amazing bird. That's just about all I wanted to say about that photo, but I am grateful that you asked me, and I've enjoyed everyone's talks and found it very informative. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you for contributing. And yeah, I really love the photo. And what I thought was also fascinating was when you posted it on Nextdoor, you got a lot of responses for people who were so excited. Also, everyone's stuck at home. And I know there was one person who commented, I've lived in Fetter Springs for 35 or 45 years. I've never seen a pileated woodpecker. So it makes me think that while they aren't shy birds, it's true that maybe because of the corona shelter in place, like we've seen in other parts of the world and other parks, the animals are coming in a bit closer because they feel less threatened.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably true. Someone asked, I didn't see whether I had gotten a picture of the tongue. I did not get a picture of the tongue. I was still figuring out the camera and couldn't get a picture of anything that moved quite as fast as the tongue, or at least nothing that wasn't a blur. I was really surprised what a reaction I got when I posted the picture on Nextdoor. People obviously loved the bird. My sense is that probably the animals are coming into the neighborhood somewhat more, but also I have the sense that people are looking around their neighborhood somewhat more. The iNaturalist's City Nature Challenge was this weekend, and I mostly just stayed in my yard, and I found all sorts of animals in my yard that had rarely, if ever, been documented in Sonoma County on a naturalist before, simply because no one had taken that close a look at the tiny little bugs and so on in their yards before. So I think we're also paying a lot more attention to the animals that are in our yards. Plus, the fact that I recognized the call and recognized the sound of it digging in the tree was very helpful. And I think probably residents who haven't seen them haven't looked for them or known that what that sound that they were hearing signified.
Very
They
cool.
are around.
So very cool. Thank you very much. And we can chat a bit more. Let me just finish off my last couple of slides. And we will open it up for a conversation. You can raise your hand thing, or maybe we can do it less formally. Like I said, there are two huge subjects that I don't have time to delve into, but we need to be aware of the impacts of climate change on all of us and our habitat, and the pileated woodpeckers as well. Audubon has a really cool website that you should check out about the pileated and other birds. They've actually have interactive maps where you can look and see the range of the map, the range of the bird, and how it will be impacted by different temperature climate changes, 1.5 centigrade, 2 or 3, and this is the just an example of the max. Fortunately for the pileated, it appears that they will survive climate change. They'll just move further to the north as the forests dry out and retract. They might even gain some habitat, but they might lose some. But I can't really delve into that, but check out that webpage. And then the last one I wanted to bring up is wildfire. We all are very well aware that we live in a fire-adapted landscape, and the pileateds thrive on dead wood and snags. Again, I couldn't find much research out there about the pileated and wildfire. One study that I did find indicates that in terms of the wildfire itself, their vulnerability in terms of their habitat and survival is low compared to a lot of other birds and woodpeckers. But there's so many variables I can't even get into. The intensity of the fire, the length of the fire, where the fire is, when is the fire. But I just wanted to at least say that that is something that we need to think about. And I also want to say that if Maya Kosla is still on the Zoom, I think are you here, Maya?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, I just wanted to say that Maya has done some fantastic work on a different species of woodpecker, the black-backed woodpecker. And she has a wonderful documentary that has been appearing on KRCB and elsewhere called Searching for the Gold Spot. So if you're really interested in getting a good overview for a particular species and the wildfire impacts and why it's for that particular bird, it's a matter of life and death, what happens before and after a wildfire to the forest. So maybe in the Q&A we can ask you if you'd like to share a bit more about that. And I also noticed that Lisa McKaylee was on the call as well. Are you still here, Lisa? Because Pepperwood is also doing.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Pepperwood is doing a lot of amazing work, of course, but I understand that you're also doing a wildfire bird survey post-wildfire. So we have some really amazing experts on the call here. So I would like to open it up now to questions, or if you want to tell a pileated woodpecker story, and if I'd love to open the floor to Maya and Lisa if you wanted to say anything on this front. Maya, maybe you first, and then Lisa.
Sure. And actually, in my wanderings, doing blackback surveys for the last 7 years, I've seen a lot of pileateds, actually in Pepperwood, in Annandale and Shiloh, all over Marin, Mendocino, El Dorado County, Tahoe, and Stanislaus, which is in the last 3 where the blackback surveys have been done for many, many years. And yeah, the blackbacks are very interesting, and also I've seen some parallels with a lot of other birds like sapsuckers and even pileated in some cases, that they just sort of come in to areas that are after the burn. In west of Yosemite, that's really one of those features that's really interesting to see. It just a lot of pileateds in some of the unknown areas, sort of going over to the lakes over to the west of the far west and north of Yosemite. So yeah, and the blackbacks are just fascinating. Everything you see, every year I learn more. Like last year, the female was reshaping the nest, and everything you see in the books is always, you just constantly learning more. I'm sure Carolyn would agree, and Meg too. Is this, the birds are teaching you something new all the time. It's beautiful. So the male was carving out as exactly as was described in some of the presentations, and then the male would go away as soon as the female came, and she would go in there and knock around inside the nest, and obviously reshaping to her liking. But she didn't do any cleanup. She would blast out of there, and the male immediately was so attentive. He came right back in. Obviously he was watching right over her very closely, foraging somewhere close by, and he came right back in, and then he would spill out all the sawdust. And this happened for hours and hours and hours. She came in, she reshaped the nest inside, hammering away inside, but didn't do any cleanup. And then they switcheroo, and then the male came and spit out all the sawdust from did the cleanup. So it was amazing. It was new stuff. But I'll answer any questions you have.
How about Lisa? Do you want to share anything about what's happening up at Pepperwood or along these lines?
Hey, Teri. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm the hydrologist. I know that we do have data on this that our preserve ecologist, Michelle Halver, has access to. I'm just sorry, I can't. I've been actually frantically trying to pull it up for you in the last 2 minutes after I knew.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the
But
spot.
anyway, I think that we have a hypothesis, certainly, that cavity cavity nesting birds should probably be favored by the increased stands of dead and dying wood. We have a long-term sort of breeding bird survey that speaks to that. So my hypothesis would be that the fires have actually probably increased the habitat for the pileated. I don't have the data at my fingertips though to show you whether or not we've actually seen that go up in count. So I think that'll be a really interesting, an interesting question to try to answer with our partners at, Audubon and Carolyn, who's been coming out and helping us to survey those. And this is a big question for people interested in birds right now, because a lot of the bird surveying activities are going to be suspended because of COVID. So we're even trying to figure out if we can actually reoccupy this year. But we're going to try to do our best, because it seems like such an important year to take the pulse of that. So thanks, Teri.
Thank you, Lisa. And now back over to Carolyn. Carolyn raised her hand. It's easier probably for me. People know how to raise their hand. So I can try to keep track. If you go to manage participants or go to participants and you go to the bottom, it should give you an option to raise your hand. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a bird chaser, but I did want to ask Maya, are there any blackbacks in Sonoma County or anywhere in the Bay Area?
I think what I've seen is 6,000 feet and higher. The lowest nest I observed last year was along the middle fork of the Tuolumne. It was 4,800 feet. So I think that altitude seems to be because of and of course they're their name Arcticus might indicate that they sort of tolerate this cold. I've seen them in more colder areas. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, Barbara Mackenzie.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that this has been so fantastic. I've learned something from everybody, and I obviously knew nothing because everything everybody said was just like brand new, fabulous information. I love bird nerd. I want to adopt that, but I'm not a bird nerd yet because I don't know anything. But I also wanted to say that the drumming thing was so interesting because I always just assumed it was just, you know, pecking, trying to chip into wood, and not that it was using it as a communication tool. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
Has anybody come across anything they can define, like what any of the drumming actually means?
I think just in general, what I've seen on Audubon, but I haven't come across any like specific studies on it. They may be out there.
I think it's territorial.
Okay.
The females also drum, but I think it's pretty much for establishing your fitness as a mate, how loud you can drum, and if you find a perfect place, a hollow tree with a big noise.
Yeah. Right.
Suzanne. Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, Barbara. Did you have another question or?
I did, and I went in and out of my brain. I want to go on some of these. I want to go on some of these walks, and I want to find out about how to link up. And I guess the other thing I wanted to say is this particular format, the Zoom, happens to be a better than anything to me because all of us can come in from different places and they can see these great pictures. It actually works better, I think, than in person. So kudos to Teri and everybody involved in this because it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it is interesting how Zoom has actually turned out to be something that I think we're all going to be using beyond shelter in place. So anyway, turn it over to you, Suzanne.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Teri. This was fun. And I just wanted to say I live in Fetters, and I saw a pileated woodpecker about 3 years ago on a utility pole. I was startled to see it because it didn't seem like it belonged in a neighborhood, but I'm delighted they're back. But now I have a woodpecker that's sort of between an acorn and a pileated. Does anyone guess at what size that might be?
Well, I need more than one field characteristic.
Yeah.
What else?
Are there a lot in that range?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
They're a medium-sized bird, maybe a tiny bit smaller than a California scrub jay, unless you saw a flicker, and they're a little bit.
No, I know flickers. Yeah.
Okay. It's our most common, other than acorn, would be a Nuttall's woodpecker, the oak woodland woodpecker. So perhaps it was that. But again, the sound is very distinctive. You can easily separate them by sound. So get one of those free apps and have fun with it. Just don't play it out in the field.
Thank you.
Alrighty then, let's see. Do we have any more hands up? I don't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe we are, oh, sorry, Nancy.
I just want to say thank you that it was a great presentation, and I agree on Zoom being a very making it easier for large groups from all over to participate in one venue, and it was fun. I liked learning all about that. Teri, what kind of a woodpecker was it we saw that was hopping backwards down the tree? Not a pileated?
Those were pileated. It was hilarious. I never seen them that low down. They were on the Valley Trail, or what do they call it, at Sugarloaf behind Ferguson, the Meadow Trail. And we were walking on the hilly side, and there was there one or two?
There was one, and I think it was like a teenager. He wasn't very big.
Yeah, he wasn't big, and he was on this skinny little tree, which you don't usually see them on. And he looked like he was like not balanced that well, and he was going backwards down the tree. And we were just looking at it. It was so hilarious. I'd never seen them going backwards down the tree, and then it kind of slipped, didn't it? It kind of slipped off and then got back up. But yeah, it definitely looked like a juvenile that was just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. But that was very fun. Anyway, shared small story.
Well, another kind of funny story, I mean, we all have stories, but I recently had some friends visiting from Australia, and I took them up to Jack London State Park to go walking, and we went up to the lake, and as we were coming back down, there was a pileated making all this noise, and they were like, wow, 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 what's that, you know? And it's like, especially if you're from, you know, a different continent and you've never seen them, so we were able to find it, and they were their iPhones. They took like 1 million pictures of this pileated, and it was so much fun because I would do the same in Australia whenever I would see a laughing kookaburra, because they're both kind of, I don't think they're in the same family, no, but you know, they're loud and kind of raucous, and so yeah, they're really fun birds. So I want to study more about them and learn more about them, and you know, study them. And I do want to do more of these, and I think as we roll out of shelter in place, I'd like to expand it to, you know, maybe actually doing some walks, or, you know, doing some in-person talks, so it doesn't have to be, you know, all Zoom all the time. And I kind of want to partner. We have so many great groups like the Ecology Center, Sonoma Mountain Preservation, Pepperwood, the Land Trust. We have all kinds of naturalists like Carolyn Green, who are independents that work with all these. So I just think this could just be another venue for inspiring, talking about nature. And I'm also wondering if it's also a good venue for the naturalists. I know, Carolyn, you were talking, telling me about after you graduated, you tried to do some kind of like a Sonoma meetup group for naturalists. So I don't know, it could also be for naturalists to kind of talk and have different, present on different things.
Yeah, I've been watching the Point Reyes Bird and Nature Festival webinars, Zoom webinars the last week or so, and they've been very well attended. The festival had to be canceled, so they've done some online presentations, and they're like yours. They're an hour long. They're not real long. They're well organized, and there have been 50 or 60 people that have tuned in, but maybe when we can get out and hike, we won't be staying home and watching so much. But I think it definitely has a future.
So Teri, I just wanted to jump in. I think Barbara asked about going on some of the walks. The Sonoma Mountain Preservation Walks, you can either sign up for our newsletter at sonomamountain.org or check our Facebook page. We post them both places. And since people are interested, we'd be happy to partner with sponsoring some of these kind of informational things that you can't, you know, that are different than an actual walk. And Carolyn asked about SDC. Sonoma Mountain Preservation, not that will make any difference, but I just sent a letter today to the head of DGS encouraging them to at least open the Suttonfield side of the campus, because we're going to be walking in the regional park anyway, but encouraging them also to open the other side. And I don't know what'll happen, but we do have a relationship with them, and they've let us, like Carolyn's hike was on the SDC campus, so hopefully they'll respond somehow.
Oh yeah, and Jack, I just saw you had your hand up. I'm sorry, I missed you.
No problem. Just curiosity. How big the bird you saw at the Jack London?
That I saw?
Yeah.
Or that we saw? I mean, you know, they're like, I guess I can't really show.
Just like smaller than the chicken or the...
They're like about the size of a crow or even a raven.
Oh, I see.
But they're loud, so it helps you to kind of zoom in on where they are. But I can't imagine they got a decent photo with an iPhone. No. It would be like a lot of tree and maybe a speck. So you need a lens like this we was talking about. Yeah. So
and Teri, thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Very beautiful. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we should probably end it. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining. I love all of you and hang in there.
Thank you. You too. Yay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Here,
Thank you,
can do-
Teri.
We can do this down here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Teri.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Thank you so much again, Carolyn. Maybe we can catch up and chat later tomorrow.